reckoning for Donald Trump, who heartily endorsed and campaigned for Roy Moore.
Get out and vote for Roy Moore.
Hi, this is President Donald Trump, and I need Alabama to go vote for Roy Moore.
But today, the president actually found a way to say, "I told you so." He put this on Twitter. Quote, "The reason I originally endorsed Luther Strange, and his numbers went up mightily, is that I said Roy Moore will not be able to win the general election. I was right. Roy worked hard, but the deck was stacked against him." And this is how the president reacted to the loss before cameras earlier today.
I would have, as the leader of the party, I would have liked to have had the seat.
How could that loss affect your agenda going forward?
I don't think it's going to affect it. I think we're doing a lot.
Ashley Parker of the Washington Post, who joins us in just a moment, reports on the mood in the White House today. She writes, quote, "By Wednesday morning, as Trump watched the unflattering portrait of the loss unfold on television, the president grew piqued at the notion that he somehow was responsible. Quote, I won Alabama, and I would have won Alabama again, Trump said, according to a senior administration official. The president himself spread the blame. He faulted his former chief strategist, Stephen K. Bannon, for selling him what one outside advisor described as a bill of goods in urging him to support Moore, and he faulted Moore himself for being an abysmal candidate. He had campaigned with Moore in Alabama as part of his own effort to take down the Republican establishment Bannon had. Today, Bannon was also under fire from some in that same establishment for backing a candidate who lost a Senate seat that had been in Republican hands, let's not forget, for 2 decades.
I don't think Steve Bannon adds anything positive at all to the dialogue in the country. To see him on the stage this week with the big American flag behind him, he looked like some disheveled drunk that wandered in off the street. To have him become the face of politics and have a major voice in politics, I think is wrong. I think we should shut him.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has been under regular attack from Steve Bannon. Don't forget, Bannon has threatened him by saying, "We're coming for you." Here is what McConnell aide Josh Holmes told Politico about Bannon and this Alabama election. Quote, he's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he has no capacity to run a U.S. Senate race. If he's capable of losing the reddest state in the nation, he's capable of losing anywhere. Other Republican senators expressed their feelings today about Moore's loss, and there was almost from some a sense of relief.
Strange to say, I guess, from my side of the aisle, but I thought it was a great night for America. So I couldn't be more happy. The people of Alabama responded, I thought, in a very appropriate way.
Alabamans didn't want somebody who dated 14-year-old girls. You need good candidates to win Senate races, yeah.
I hope it sends a message that, we can do better. Republicans can do better.
3 interesting Republican reactions there. And from the great state of New Jersey, a new Monmouth poll seems to highlight Senator Flake's comment there that Republicans can do better. The president's job approval rating stands at 32%, way underwater. Looking ahead to 2018, 51% of people said they would vote for the generic Democratic candidate in their district if elections were held today. 36% Republican. All of it brings us to our leadoff panel on a post-election Wednesday night. Jeremy Peters, political reporter for the New York Times and an MSNBC contributor. The aforementioned Ashley Parker, White House reporter for the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst. And David Jolly is back with us, former Republican member of Congress from Florida. Jeremy, this has gone better than expected inside the White House. Your paper is out with similar reporting tonight, though there's no shortage, I guess, of blame to go around.
No, there's not, and that's because Republicans across the spectrum don't recognize their party. You heard that in the voices of Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, who expressed just utter disgust at the fact that the Republican Party could even nominate somebody like Roy Moore. And you have people on the other side of call it the Steve Bannon Trumpism spectrum of the party that don't understand why leaders in their own party would openly advocate for the election of a Democrat. So this election, while it resolves one messy dispute for the moment, I think Brian has only opened even further the deep wounds within the Republican Party right now.
Ashley, another great night of reporting for you. Were you surprised that there wasn't more of an internal West Wing rage going on? And where do you put the status of the blame game?
I will say not only was I surprised, but more importantly, a number of Trump's own aides were surprised. When I talked to them last night, right after the results, they were all bracing for sort of what has now become a pattern of watching TV, getting enraged, fuming, and the ensuing chaos. But in fact, the president was maybe saying he handled it with a note of grace, might be a bit of an overstatement, but he was relatively calm and he seemed sort of at peace with the decision of the Alabama voters, and what we saw with him saying publicly was also what he said privately, that he's sort of willing to just move on and look ahead. In terms of blame, you're exactly right. There's a lot of blame to go around. The three people I heard that the president is most acutely blaming is Mitch McConnell, because he's frustrated that he got in and sort of too aggressively tried to push out more. He's frustrated with Steve Bannon, as I wrote, because he thinks he sold him this bill of goods, and the president was convinced to support more, in part because of Bannon's promises that Moore could win. And finally, he's upset with Moore himself. He's certainly blaming Moore, and he's not incorrect in saying that Moore was a quite awful candidate.
David Jolly, our mutual friend Nicole Wallace, likes to say of Senator Corker, he has had the truth serum of knowing he's not running for re-election. It is still bracing to hear him say that last night was a great night for America. I'll put the same question to you. For the Republican Party you know and love, do you think last night was good for that Republican Party?
Oh, of course. It was good for the country, but also good for the party, because Roy Moore would have become the second most popular face of the Republican Party going into 2018 if he had won. But listen, the reason Trump and a lot of Republicans, I think, are breathing a sigh of relief tonight and not as worried as we think they should be is they don't see Roy Moore as an example of what we're looking at in 2018. Very likely, Roy Moore is the worst candidate we will see in the 2018 cycle. We know that. The House has insulated some, their vulnerable members, through gerrymandering. In the Senate, Democrats have to defend 25 seats. Republicans only have to defend 8 or 9 seats. But what Republican insiders are overlooking are two very important things. We will see more bad candidates come forward. Steve Bannon has already met with Michael Grimm in New York, who left office to serve time in federal prison and now wants to run for Congress again. We're seeing a Senate candidate in Arizona who is speaking with little eloquence, if we're being generous. But here's the other thing they're overlooking, and this is the most important thing we saw last night. The energy on the left is incredible right now. We saw it in Virginia. We saw it in New Jersey. The energy on the left to get out and vote. Listen, you can't make voters get out and turn out to vote if they don't want to. The left is looking to vote right now. They are eager to get to 2018 and vote. The right is exhausted, and they are burdened by a president with 32% approval ratings.
All right, Jeremy, let's talk about Mr. Bannon. Equally bracing to hear Peter King, Long Island Republican, say the guy looks like a drunk on stage. Someone else last week said it looks like he sleeps in his car. Is Steve Bannon capable of any humility after a defeat?
For the record, Steve Bannon does not drink, so just clear that up as a matter of fact.
We should. Good point. Thank you.
No problem, Brian. But I do think that this morning I spent some time with Bannon. I listened to him take calls on his radio show, and I did sense for the first time an uncertainty about him. He quizzed his callers with questions like, is the energy among the conservative grassroots still there? He wanted to know if Moore was the right candidate or not. And, you know, he knows the answer to these questions. He's asking them because he is himself having doubts, I think. Publicly, however, he is going to remain defiant. He sees absolutely nothing to gain politically from cozying up to Mitch McConnell and the Republican establishment, because his whole political brand and the ethos of the movement he is trying to lead is about challenging Republican leadership. So what he's going to do, and I think what is going to just exacerbate the tensions in the party even further, is continue to blame McConnell for this loss. And you're hearing this across the conservative media already. You heard it last night. You will hear it for weeks and months to come. The reason the Senate now only has 51 Republicans is because of Mitch McConnell and Richard Shelby and others like them who decided that it was better that a Democrat be in the office than a Republican. That's the argument you're going to hear, and that's going to have a lot of sway with voters. What I think they also need to take into consideration, though, is that that's going to depress a lot of voters. The fact that Republicans will feel like their party is just a mess, it's not getting anything done, and then they're not going to show up in 2018. That's a real worry.
Ashley, you touch on this in your piece tonight. Talk about what remains of the Trump-Bannon relationship. Do they need each other? Is it truly symbiotic?
I think at the end of the day, and this is what we heard from both people in Trump's world and people in Bannon's world, is that sort of this too shall pass. The president is frustrated with Steve Bannon, but it's a relationship of mutual need. Steve Bannon sort of needs to tie himself to the president's brand in a lot of ways, and that populism that Trump captured in a way no one else could. And Trump believes, correctly or incorrectly, it's unclear, that he sort of needs Steve Bannon to channel his impulses into a political ideology and to keep him in touch and kind of interpret the base for him. So there was a sense that, yes, he's angry, but that anger will likely fade, and the two of them still talk on the phone from time to time, and that will likely continue.
David Jolly, the president has a meeting tomorrow morning on his official schedule with the chairwoman of the RNC. What's that likely to be like?
Listen, this is a Republican Party that went in for Roy Moore, and this is what we can't overlook. And the nation knows that. And so this is Donald Trump's party. This is Roy Moore's party. Even though he lost a general election last night, the fact is the Republican Party in Alabama nominated him as their candidate. Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, whatever their flights might be, either good or bad from day to day, the reality is they are attached at the hip in terms of their view of the Republican Party and where leadership, where they want leadership of this party to be. The reality is they are creating not just a wave, but a tsunami, and we can't overlook how policy will impact that. Listen, tsunamis are caused by an underwater earthquake. The underwater earthquake about to launch this is not Roy Moore. It's now the tax bill that is historically unpopular, and going into 2018, Democrats have every tool they need to take over the House and possibly the Senate.
Our thanks tonight, Jeremy Peters, Ashley Parker, David Jolly. We really appreciate you coming on again, this post-election night coverage, being in our first group of guests tonight. Coming up for us, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein in the hot seat today while the war on Robert Mueller was fought all around him. And not far from there, Donald Trump Jr. making his third appearance before a congressional committee. The topic there, too, the Russia investigation. That and more when the 11th hour, the Wednesday edition, continues.
DC. Have you seen good cause to fire Special Counsel Mueller?
No.
Thank you. If you were ordered today to fire Mr. Mueller, what would you do?
So I've explained previously, I would follow the regulation. If there were good cause, I would act. If there were no good cause, I would not.
That was Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein on Capitol Hill today, defending Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his Russia investigation. Republicans, as we've reported here, are attempting to discredit Mueller with renewed vigor this week in light of new information about an FBI agent who was removed from the overall Mueller team. The DOJ made the rare decision to release about 90 pages of anti-Trump, pro-Clinton text messages sent between that agent and his girlfriend. She also worked for the FBI at the time. Today, Rosenstein stood by the integrity of the Department of Justice.
How, with a straight face, can you say that this group of Democrat partisans are unbiased and will give President Trump a fair shake?
Congressman, I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about political affiliation, that all demonstrates political affiliation. The issue of bias is something different. I've discussed this with Director Mueller, and he and I collectively have a lot of experience managing offices in the Department of Justice. We recognize we have employees with political opinions, and it's our responsibility to make sure those opinions do not influence their actions.
The New York Times reporting this today, quote, Democrats say the pattern is becoming clear. As Mr. Mueller moves closer to Mr. Trump's inner circle, Republicans trying to discredit federal law enforcement and undercut the eventual findings of the special counsel. The Republican effort may also be intended to blunt the political repercussions should Mr. Mueller be fired, Democrats say. And the president's eldest son made his third trip amidst all this to Capitol Hill today to answer questions about Russian interference in the 2016 election. This time, Donald Trump Jr. appeared before the Senate Intelligence Committee. He spent about 9 hours in all answering questions, but did not say anything as he exited. For more, we are joined here tonight by attorney Joe Weinbanks, former assistant Watergate special counsel and an MSNBC legal analyst, and Michael Crowley, national security editor and senior correspondent for Politico. Welcome to you both. Michael, to you first. How seriously should people take this smear campaign against Robert Mueller?
Well, extremely seriously. If anything, it's been building over time to what feels like is approaching a crescendo. And it actually predates these reports about the text messages between a couple of FBI officials. So although that has provided kind of rocket fuel for this idea that Mueller and his team are tainted, some sort of edict seems to have gone out around the time of Thanksgiving where the conservative outlets and members of Congress kind of fired up the jets to go after Mueller. And the big question, Brian, is what exactly is the goal here? Is it to lay the groundwork for President Trump to potentially fire Mueller? Or is this an attempt to create almost to taint the jury pool, to create a political climate in which Mueller's report, if he writes one, as you know, there's not a guarantee that he will submit one to Congress, but if he does,
born tainted.
I'm sorry?
That it would be born tainted.
That it would be born tainted, and because what will happen is if he submits a report to Congress with damning allegations about the president's behavior leading to a potential impeachment, it is not a legal process but a political one. So the question is, are they trying to pave the way for the president to knock Mueller out, or is this the beginning of a long political fight that might be playing out in the Congress in the form of potential impeachment proceedings or an argument about whether to proceed with impeachment proceedings?
Now, Jill, I am guessing, based on all available evidence, that the instructions from Mueller to his team are keep your heads down and let's keep working. But the question to you is, can this cause real damage to an investigation like this?
First of all, let me say that I think we've heard it tonight for sure, that having a political opinion does not disqualify you as a prosecutor or an investigator. It's sort of the same thing as if you're a juror. You have an opinion. When you hear on television the prosecutor or the defense lawyer questioning jurors to find out if they have opinions, it doesn't mean they're excluded. They're only excluded if they cannot set aside their pre-existing opinions and judge on the evidence. And that's what we as prosecutors have always done. We set aside our personal opinions, we look at the evidence, and we base our conclusions on the evidence. The danger here is that Trump's base will believe that it is less credible. And during the Watergate prosecution, our press officer took very proactive steps to make sure that the American people knew who we were and that we were credible and that we weren't out to get the president. And I have seen no evidence that anyone on Mueller's team is out to get the president. They are out to get the facts, and they will make their decisions based on them. So far, they've come up with facts that support criminal indictments of at least 4 members of the Trump team, and we'll have to wait and see whether they get it closer to his family or even to the president.
Jill,
but it will be based on fact.
That is a great point to make. It's insulting, in fact, to professionals in so many walks of life when they're painted with a broad brush as having opinions. Their jobs are another thing entirely. Michael, Ty Cobb has said in the past few days that the interviews with people in the White House have come to an end. Could that be true? Could that leave out maybe callbacks?
It could. Ty Cobb has become a mysterious figure in this.
Starting with the name and the mustache.
Saga. He is a kind of a character out of a movie to begin with, and it is compounded by the fact that he is making public statements that have people across Washington scratching their heads. Not only journalists, but also lawyers who are watching the Trump legal strategy from afar. To your specific question, I think if you parse his language, I believe what Cobb has said is that Mueller has spoken to all the White House officials whom he had put in requests to speak with. But that does not mean that Mueller will not have further requests. So it really just means that he had asked to talk to a bunch of people. He has spoken to them, but nothing stops him from saying, I want to come back and talk to more people. And of course, at some point, it would be impossible to believe he is not going to talk to Donald Trump himself. And